I've loved science ever since I was a little kid. When I was 5 years old, I had a little Gilbert chemistry set, and I had a little chemistry set in the basement, and loved it all along. And in school, when they asked me what I wanted to be, everyone would say, I want to be a and I want to be a fireman or a policeman. I would say, I want to be a paleontologist, and they used to give me a lot of attention. So I thought I loved dinosaurs at the time, and so I kind of pursued that. But then when I got into college and I was studying the dinosaurs and stuff, I realized that comparative vertebrate zoology was a lot of memorizing, and I hated it. Ended up being a biochemist. Yeah, so no, I was raised in the church, and as a Lutheran, it was down the block, and my mom and dad were both Christians. I lived in the inner city of Detroit, and I lived in the worst area of Detroit that you could possibly have. Within a 4-mile radius of my house, 55 people would get killed every day, and 3 times that would be wounded. So after 10 years, that's how many people would there's blood stains on the street, and it's just a crazy place to live. Yeah, there was no God, and that was it. And you'd be pretty silly to believe that there was one. I figured that, with all the violence and things in the world, if God wanted us in heaven, He'd take us right now. So He didn't want that. What are we doing on earth? Didn't read any C.S. Lewis or anything to counter any of that. So and didn't run into my friends weren't religious at all either. So we were all pretty much in agreement. And then my sister, she blew her brains with drugs, and friend died of heroin overdose, and so it was just a crazy world, and so I just kind of rejected God at that point. There was one professor I had who had a cross on his wall, and I kept thinking maybe I better go set him straight one day, but never really went in there and talked to the man. So I just had my buddies, and we'd go out, and I already had made my decision. There was no God, and I kind of thought it was kind of silly. I kind of believed in some of the New Age stuff going on, that there was maybe a non-time dimensional energy force out there, but it didn't love me, and it was just that might explain some supernatural phenomena, but didn't give much thought to it. Just pretty much was bouncing off the walls of life. It wasn't until I came here to Louisville that I experienced God. My wife was still a Christian. I met her. It took me 6 years of dating, and finally nabbed her, and we came to Louisville. And this was definitely a God event. Without a doubt, some people invited us to Southeast Christian, and we took it up. I says, well, I'll go to Southeast and set the Christian straight and get my wife off my back. And I saw the love and joy in the place, and eventually, committed myself. Was baptized in 1996. Well, yeah, so becoming a Christian, and the first verse you read is, in the beginning God created heaven and earth. Well, that's kind of okay, because He can do whatever He wants. He spoke the stars into existence, and that's manageable. But then this evolution business, and He created God out of the dust of the ground. I had to start dealing with that sort of thing. And then I'm a chemist, so I know all the biochemistry, and I think God gave us science so that we can see that He exists, that there's no way to explain how we were formed just from the molecules by time, chance, and laws of physics. Just no way. As a matter of fact, it's not like a black box where we don't know. We do know the biochemistry, and the biochemistry says the odds are enormous. It really points to a creator. My wife and I went to we took a road trip to North Dakota, to the Black Hills, and we were driving our car around, and we saw a needle rock formation, and you can imagine that needle rock formation could be formed by time, chance, and laws of physics. You would need a God for that. The wind, the rain. If I was with another scientist friend, told him God made that, and I believe God's hands and everything, but couldn't convince a scientist that God made that anything special. But then you drive around the corner, and we come through this tunnel, and through that tunnel you can see the 4 presidents' heads, Mount Rushmore. And now there's no way I could tell a scientist friend that was formed by time, chance, and laws of physics. Why would that be? And the reason for that is because it's really complex and has lots of information. And you just don't see presidents' heads in all the mountains. It's very rare also. So Not only is it 4 presidents' heads, 4 famous presidents' heads. So it's very specific. And so it's complex specified information that's there. I believe that time, chance, laws of physics doesn't produce that. It has to be produced by a creator. And now our bodies are much more complicated than Mount Rushmore, and yet scientists will tell you that our bodies were formed by time, chance, and laws of physics. It's beyond belief because you couldn't tell the same scientist that Mount Rushmore was formed by time, chance, and laws of physics, and that's much less complicated than our bodies. We have this thing called DNA. God gave us this DNA in our bodies. It's about 6 foot long. It's about 100 times thinner than a spider web. And it contains all the information necessary to make our bodies, to make every cell, to make our eyes. It gives us our personality, disease characteristics, whether it be smart or beautiful. And that's all encoded in this DNA. Incredible amount of information. There's so much information in a DNA molecule that if it's kind of like there's words in the DNA molecule, like a computer program. If you were to read each word for 1 second, it would take 385 years to read the encyclopedia of one DNA that's your body that God gave you as an individual. And no one has the same DNA. And if this DNA molecule is to form by time, chance, and laws of physics, totally remote chance. I mean, you can imagine, I told you it's like a spider web. You can imagine a spider web, holding a spider web, how thin that would be in the air, which is probably battered around. Well, it's 100 times thinner than a spider web. And can you imagine this spider web existing in a puddle 160 million years ago and being formed by time, chance, and laws of physics? It just would not be. Yeah, so abiotic evolution is how did we evolve by time, chance, and laws of physics before life began? How did life form? And so as a biochemist, it's just biochemistry. There's no evolution per se. It's just biochemicals. So we have, the scientists will tell you that there was about 160 million years from the time the Earth cooled till the time life began. And so abiotic evolution is how did the molecules form? We had little atoms floating around in it, say like in a puddle. And these atoms had to form larger molecules, and these molecules got together and formed even larger molecules. And all these large molecules had to come together, and somehow they formed life. They have to fold, like I said, to work as a machine. Then they'd all have to be in the right spot. The odds of that are remote. And then on top of that, the DNA molecule that I told you had to be formed there. And then you'd have to enclose it all in this membrane. And there's not a single paper out there where those lipids, the membrane's made of these fats called lipids. No one knows where they come from, and how a membrane could form around those molecules. So, abiotic evolution by time, chance, and laws of physics is a remote. It's not even a possibility. It's the odds are so remote. It kind of points to a God. The odds of forming a protein are really remote. So you can imagine we've got atoms forming molecules, and these molecules come together to form the protein. So a protein is a compound that is in every cell of your bodies. Your body's made up of thousands of these cells, and then each cell is surrounded by a saran wrap, a lipid membrane, and then inside the cell is these organelles. And inside the organelles are proteins and lipids, and what these proteins do is they're little machines. They'll make compounds and they'll move compounds, and some of them are just for structure. And we need them for life. That's just one component of life is a protein. Well, scientists figured out what the probability is of making one protein in this sea of amino acids. That's the building blocks of a protein. And normally, like I work with this calcium pump, I'll talk to you a little bit about that later, but I work with this calcium pump, and it's made up of 1,000 amino acids. So 1,000 of these amino acids have to come together in a long strand, and then the strand has to fold upon itself and form a machine. So even just making the strand, it has to fold properly to even work. But anyway, that's to make one protein. You need about 1,000 amino acids. Well, if you were to react all these amino acids in this little puddle at 10 to the 12th per second for 160 million years, or for 1 billion years, we gave it 1 billion years, even though there's less time than that we'll give you the benefit of the doubt and give you 1 billion years, 10 to the 12th times per second, to make one single protein. There's one protein would be 10 to the 65th power. Wow, that's an amazing number. There's only 10 to the 80th atoms in the universe. You'd have to win the lottery every week for 8 weeks in a row. That's the kind of odds to make one protein. Now to make the simplest life form has 2,000 proteins. There's nothing less than 2,000. So then it'd be 10 to the 40th power, 10 to the 40,000th power to make all the proteins necessary to form life. And the odds of that, you'd have to win the lottery every day for 95 years. So you could go, not every day, every week for 95 years. So you could go 94 years without, and win it every week. But if you don't miss that 95, it doesn't count. You have to win that often. The odds are so remote that would happen to be beyond chance. Why would you even believe that? Yet scientists will tell you that's how it happened, because that's how it has to happen, because they don't have a God. It's just science is how we observe our world through time, chance, laws of physics. Doesn't invoke supernatural. So biochemistry tells us that's impossible. I think science will never tell us how we were created, and we'll never know. There will never be a supercomputer that will be more intelligent than us to explain how everything occurred, because the Heisenberg uncertainty principle tells us that we can't know the location of an object and its momentum or position at the same time. So we'll always be uncertain. There'll always be a certain uncertainty. And as I was saying earlier, God we can't even comprehend him, because it's like my dog understanding how the computer works. We're limited in intelligence. We'll never understand all that. And then there's the law of conservation of knowledge, where you can't get more information out of an equation than that's put into it. So we'll never have a supercomputer that'll outthink us and put it all together. The areas that we can't understand, it will suddenly understand. And just one of the fundamental drawbacks of science is that science, by definition, excludes God. It's just how we view our world by time, chance, and laws of physics, and doesn't evoke the supernatural. So even though science is truth and it's a subset of truth, God lies outside the truth. He's supernatural. And science, just by definition, man-made definition, excludes God. So they're looking, as a scientist, then you're looking for how we evolved by time, chance, laws of physics. And you just don't even allow the existence of God because it's not part of the definition. So that presents a problem for scientists. It's naturalism, and that's a problem.